Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and today we will be discussing House of Odysseus by Claire North, and I do always want to call it House of Penelope because the last book in the series is the last Song of Penelope, and I mix those two up constantly.
Yes. This is a sequel to Ithaca by Claire North, which we discussed on the podcast and interviewed Claire about 2 years ago, I think.
Yes, I think the episode came out in April of 2023.
So if you haven't read that or listened to that episode, this conversation will absolutely spoil that book. However, that being said, the Odyssey also spoils these books, and that's a pretty well-known, I mean, even if you haven't read the book itself.
If you are familiar with the story of the Odyssey, you generally know what happens in this trilogy, although the trilogy does combine a couple of other Greek myths into it. All of the stuff with Clytemnestra and Electra is not part of the Odyssey.
Right. But the point is, we're talking about some, I don't even want to call it Greek mythology.
I mean, well-known stuff. I would call it
Yes.
Greek mythology.
Yeah.
I consider it part of mythology.
Oh, Sif has decided she's recording with us tonight. Hello, little
She
cat.
has strong thoughts about House of Odysseus.
Yes. Are you going to purr into the microphone?
No, she's just going to shove her butt into the camera, which only I can see.
You're welcome. All
I
right.
love it. I'm just sad that listeners don't get to enjoy it.
If we get a good frame, you should screenshot it.
She's not cooperating. Did that work? Did that do it? There we go.
Thanks, sis.
Thank you, Sif. I appreciate your service.
All right. How distracting is it going to be to record like this for the next hour?
I mean, if Sif wants to do it, Sif
All
can
right.
do it.
Well, before we get too deep in our conversation about this book, first our introductory questions. A quick 5 minutes before we're back on topic. What's something great that happened recently?
I just got back from a trip to Australia and New Zealand, or New Zealand and Australia, with some friends, which was a lot of fun. We did the Hobbiton Halfling Marathon. I did not run a marathon, to be clear. I did the 11K version, which is about 7 miles, and that was hard enough. Thank you very much. Would do it again, but also, boy, that was hard. But it was a lot of fun.
I mean, good for you, but damn.
It was not so much the length, because 7 miles, I can do that. I mean, I'm tired afterwards, but I can do that flat. It's the fact that it was up and down, and there was very little flat, and the ups were very steep, and the downs were very steep. And
did you
that
feel
made it
like
hard.
Gimli running through Middle-earth?
I did.
Trying to keep up with fucking Legolas?
Yes. And also they had orcs at some of the support stations.
Oh, cute.
Which was really cool.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
It was actually genuinely amazing. Even though it was very hard, I would do it again. Because it was just the whole vibe of it, the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It was like a party in Hobbiton. And we did a Hobbiton tour beforehand, but you get to run through bits of Hobbiton that you only get to see from a distance for when you actually do the tour. So that was really neat.
That's awesome. And
they had when you were running through Hobbiton, they had musicians playing the fiddle and things like that. And it was just the atmosphere was excellent.
My good thing for this week is that we started our garden for the summer. We are doing artichokes this year. We've tried them before, but I have no idea what they look like when they're little. So I think we always pull them out because we think they're weeds.
I've never grown artichokes from seed. I've always bought artichoke starters.
Yeah.
I kill all my artichokes. I mean, the plants should last a couple of years and mine just don't, but
they're supposed to be very happy here. And we have neighbors that have artichoke plants in their front yard that we get to admire every year. And it makes me very jealous.
I have neighbors that have that too.
But I've never actually grown one. I'm pretty sure it's because we always pull them out. So we have them in a dedicated area instead of just randomly this time. I think it'll be better.
You could also always try growing them in little paper cups to start.
Yeah, I should have started them a couple weeks ago if I was going to do that.
Fair.
We have a finite growing window here.
Fair.
But yeah, got some time digging in the dirt. It did start raining. I'm a little muddy. That's okay. What are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking wine because I kind of feel like one has to.
I agree completely. This book, definitely a wine book.
Yes. I'm not drinking red wine and I'm not diluting my wine with water, but it's still wine. Still counts.
Still counts. And have you read anything else good lately?
I did start reading Tolkien and the Study of His Sources, Critical Essays, edited by Jason Fisher. I did not get as much reading done over the trip as I had thought that I maybe would have. Well, I didn't think I would get a lot of reading done. I got even less reading than I thought that I would get done.
Ain't it always the case?
Yes. But I did start reading that book, and it was fun to be reading it in New Zealand. And it's good. I'm enjoying it so far.
I started reading The Last Song of Penelope by Claire North.
Cheating! We're not supposed to read that until August.
Technically, that's not a rule. I just have to read it sometime before August.
Okay, you have to remember enough of it to be able to discuss it in August when we cover it on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way I'm gonna have time to finish it anytime soon, but holy shit, after finishing this book, I was like, I am not done. I don't care that this book has ended. I'm still reading this series. You can't stop me.
I mean, to be fair, I was tempted to do that too because I need to know what happens next. In this books, I mean, in the series specifically, like obviously we know what happens in the, Odyssey, but like in this book specifically, I need to know what happens next.
Yes. Which, I mean, that is a great feeling to have when you finish a book. Bravo, North.
Absolutely.
However, this book itself, House of Odysseus, is the second book in its confirmed trilogy, right? The last song of Penelope. That has to be the last book. It's the last song.
Yes, it is a trilogy.
Okay. So we just read book 2, and it has been 2 years since we read Ithaca, the first book. How much did you remember?
I mean, I remember the Odyssey, so I at least had those, like, bits covered, even though I don't think the first book follows the Odyssey very much at all, because it's all about Penelope. Reading House of Odysseus, I was kind of like, oh yeah, I remembered Clytemnestra shows up in book 1, but if you had asked me about that before reading House of Odysseus, I'm not sure I could have told you that.
Yeah, I distinctly remember describing it to someone because I had just started this book and I was so excited. And I was like, yeah, and this book is narrated by Aphrodite, and like each book is a different goddess. And like the first book was narrated by, I think, Athena? No,
it's
not
Hera,
Athena.
isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, I did at least remember that it was Hera who narrated book 1.
So clearly I was operating off of mostly vibes.
That's not the worst thing ever, to be honest.
And also, I figured it out. I was about 10% into the book when I made that very bad description of the first one. Or not bad description, but inaccurate in a way that someone who has not read the book would not care less about. But I am embarrassed of now in retrospect.
Yes, fair. And I mean, I do think that in an ideal world, we would have read these books closer together. But that's why this is our year of sequels.
Yes.
Where we are trying to read some of the things that have sequels that we did not read in a timely manner.
So the specifics definitely were things that I had to kind of figure out as I went along. However, I think this series, as far as reading the books in very long sequence goes, really benefits from being a sort of Odyssey retelling, just because it gives you a framework to work within. And so, while I was kind of muddling along in the first quarter of this book, I was like, oh yeah, duh, the suitor. Like, there was enough that I just knew from culture, because God knows I don't remember the Odyssey from when I read it in high school either. But there is enough of this story in the air that I breathe that I was not like, I never felt lost.
Yeah, I do think that for our particular reading case, that is having 2 years in between book 1 and book 2, it helps that we do have this frame of reference that we can use to bolster our knowledge of book 1, right?
Yeah.
And I did feel a little more lost in the stuff that deviates more from the Odyssey. Like, I don't know Clytemnestra's story as well. I don't know Electra's story as well. So those bits I had more trouble remembering just because I'm not as familiar with them.
Yeah.
But I also think that the book does a decent job at giving you the knowledge you need to pick it up.
Well, and even just from the approach of this is a novel, like ignore all of the Greek mythology aspect of it. We are reintroduced to the setting. The book starts with the goddess Aphrodite describing Ithaca to us and, you know, being very dismissive and speaking down about it because it's just this awful little island where nothing interesting happens, which is really like fun. I don't know. I love the scrappy palace vibes. It's not a huge, luxurious, palatial castle. It's a palace only because the queen lives there.
Yes, it's definitely not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's I should know this word because it's a really like easy common word.
You're
It's not the
talking
elegant
yes.
palace that one thinks of maybe when one thinks of a palace. It really is just a palace because Penelope lives there and she's the queen.
And so the book does reintroduce that to you. When characters are brought up, we are given hints and clues about who they are, even if they were in the first book. So I don't think you need a Greek mythology framework.
Yeah, well, and
to pick
that's
this
what I
back
meant.
up.
That's what I meant when I said that the book does a good job at reintroducing everything.
Yes, I'm agreeing with you.
Yes.
I do wonder, I mean, I would not call myself a Greek scholar by any sense of the meaning. However, I would call myself a Greek mythology nerd, if you accept the distinction between those two.
I accept the distinction between
Yes.
those two.
And that definitely helped me. I don't know, at one point they just throw out like, oh yeah, Castor and Pollux. And I was like, I could not explain that story to you, but I recognize those names and kind of have a sense of the vibe. Do I think I needed that? No. Would I have gotten more out of this if I had taken 30 seconds to Google it? Probably.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think you needed to know how they fit into Greek mythology to like have the benefit of that reference, to be honest. I think knowing that it was a reference was probably enough.
Yeah. But I bet if I did actually bother to look that up, that it would have brought something to the passage. Because you know North mentioned it thoughtfully and wasn't just sprinkling in references to prove that she could.
Absolutely. I mean, when she adds in references, it does feel intentional. Like, it's not just, hey, let me show you how much I know about Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder what the reading experience is like for people who are not fans of Greek mythology like we are.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, I'm sure that you can still enjoy this book, obviously. It's a good book. It's engaging and the story's entertaining and you want to know what happens to the characters. So I don't mean to imply that if you don't like Greek mythology, you're not going to like this book, but I do wonder just how that reading experience differs.
I am so curious as well because it brings a little extra magic to the table. I just in that Greek mythology is nostalgic for me because I remember reading the stories as a little kid, and not that the story in this book is something I would have read as a kid. But it gives it an advantage over me, at least.
I mean, I did have a child's version of the Iliad and the Odyssey that I read, illustrated. I still have it somewhere. Actually, I could probably point exactly where on my shelves it is, but
this is an example of why this podcast is better when we disagree.
you're not wrong, but I don't think we're going to disagree that much over this book.
No, and because we're coming at it kind of from the same angle, we don't have any counterpoint or other perspective. This is a case in which we overlap quite firmly, and so
sorry listeners, you're out of luck.
Yeah. Someone tell us, someone who has read this book or any Ithaca, any book in this series. Although there's no way you've read the second. You can't read the second book without the first book. That's crazy. Don't do that.
No. This is not one of those books where it doesn't matter what order you read it in. You do have to read book 1 before book 2.
But I would love to hear, someone who is not steeped in Greek mythology, how it was like reading this. I'm very curious. Now, the first book was not from the perspective of Athena. That is actually the third book. Duh, Lily. But, I was excited and not paying attention, and I'm going to give myself a break there.
I do really enjoy how the perspective of the different narrators brings different aspects to the table from book to book. Like, Hera is a very different person from Aphrodite. And so Hera's narration focuses on different things about the characters, about the setting in book 1 than Aphrodite's does in book 2. And that was a lot of fun, even though as we've talked about, I didn't actually remember Hera's narration all that well, but yeah. I did know it was different.
Aphrodite as a narrator worked very well for me. I think she and I would be friends.
I'm not sure I can say the same thing. I liked her as a narrator, but I liked Hera better, and I probably would not be friends with Aphrodite. She's fine. I wouldn't be like enemies with her. No. I just wouldn't be, we wouldn't be close buds.
As the goddess of love and passion, she was very much focused on the tender relationships between characters, which I am such a sucker for.
And which are, historically my absolute favorite thing.
I mean, Aphrodite was very conscious, and through her Aphrodite, Claire North was very conscious of not just focusing on lovey-dovey romance.
It's true. Aphrodite also did value the close friendships and things like that. So it wasn't like it was all romance all the time.
She talks a lot about how the goddesses Artemis and Athena are, they're the chaste goddesses, and they've eschewed love and passion. And so they think that means that they do not love. And Aphrodite is like, look at how nice you are to your huntresses. Obviously you love them. Which I really liked. And then in the same breath, she would say, I will never say this to her because she would hate it. And I was like, good emotional intelligence, Aphrodite. Smart.
Yes.
Ooh. Selfishly, I am personally working on a story that heavily features Aphrodite, and I was very glad that I characterized her very differently from this, because holy shit, do I not want to be compared to this book. Why would I set myself up for that misery?
It's a very high bar. This book.
The prose is so good, especially because it is told from the perspective of a goddess. This sense of tension and foreshadowing in every sentence was just spot on, and it kept you engaged for every moment.
Yeah, and I just tonally, I love the tone of the narrator. It's just so much fun.
Yes, and very silly. I think
it's not so. It doesn't take itself seriously, right? It plays with the narration in a way that I really enjoy.
At one point, very early on, Aphrodite says, the naiad who bore Penelope and thrust her into her father's arms with a merry cry of, she's yours, bye! Incredible.
It's just good. It's so good. But a quick summary of what this book in particular is about. So in book 1, Orestes kills his mother Clytemnestra on Ithaca, and in book 2, and then he goes mad. And in book 2, in this book, it's kind of dealing with the fallout of that. So Menelaus,
the king of Sparta,
comes looking for Orestes because he is playing the concerned uncle, but really he wants to take over, all of the Greek kingdoms and
because
isles, basically.
Orestes is the king of Mycenae. Mycenae? I got most of the letters right.
Yes, he is basically the high king of all of the Greeks, and Menelaus would like to be high king of all the Greeks.
Yes.
But Menelaus is a jerk, and Penelope doesn't want to see him in that position. And so he kind of settles on Ithaca, and Penelope has to figure out what to do.
Yes, how to manage this shit show.
Yes. I mean, that's a terrible summary of the book. Read the book, but I think that gets the broad strokes of it.
A lot of this book is the politicking that Penelope has to do as the ostensible hostess to Menelaus, even though Menelaus clearly has the upper hand and is the one calling all of the shots. But the very subtle manipulations around that of, Penelope trying to say, "Oh, no, but I couldn't. Like, as your hostess, I must insist." And him saying, "Oh, no, what kind of guest would I be if I such and such?" And that, like, both of them knowing that they both know exactly what they're doing, but keeping up appearances anyway, was just delightful. That's the kind of politics that I love.
It's a very interpersonal politics.
Yes. And, I mean, the fate of all of Greece hangs in the balance, of course, but it comes down to Menelaus has to be nice to Laertes, because Laertes is the old king of Ithaca, and with Odysseus gone, he is kind of the man of the house, and Menelaus has to respect him, even if Laertes is being the most fabulous ass.
Well, and also Laertes is a hero in his own right. Like,
Yes.
he went and did heroic stuff looking for the Golden Fleece with Jason.
Have I ever told you about my time on the Argo?
And so there's that added aspect, which means Menelaus can't just, push him down. And Laertes absolutely takes advantage of that to help protect his island and Ithaca's independence.
I fucking loved the mutual respect between Penelope and Laertes.
Yes.
I feel like we didn't see them interact that much in the first book. She kind of calls him in as a heavy hitter, maybe once or twice, and then, of course, his farm gets burned down. If you don't remember his farm gets burned down, he brings that up a lot, and I think that's fair, because, like, his farm got burned down.
His farm got burned down. And I didn't remember that his farm got burned down, so it helped that he brought it up a lot,
Yes.
to be fair.
But the two of them are really, well, behind the scenes, they are a united front in this book, and they play to each other's strengths so well when, like, in front of other people. Laertes playing as the dismissive, shitty father-in-law, but actually, like, running perfect interference so Penelope can get done what she needs to get done.
I think the thing about the relationship is that in the first book, we see them interact, but we don't necessarily see the level of mutual respect that they have for each other.
He's pretty dismissive of her, which everyone is, because she's a lady.
Yes, and also they don't, at that point in the first book, they don't necessarily have to be a united front against an outside enemy.
Right.
Like Menelaus. I mean, obviously they're pirates or whatever, but they don't have to be a cohesive unit.
Mm-hmm.
And here they really do, in order to preserve their way of life. And you can see through their process of collaboration, you can see that yeah, they actually do have a lot of mutual respect, and they do work really well together. And so that was what made their dynamic so engaging.
He is the only male character that Penelope actually trusts. At least at the beginning of this book.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue
Eyebrow
that
waggle.
she kind of trusts some other people, but she trusts Laertes more.
Yeah. And there is an advisor who she does, like, who she knows is on her side. But at one point, I think about halfway through this book, we hear some of, is it Medon? I think that's his name.
Yeah, I think so.
We get his internal narrative, and he's like, "Oh no, I don't like that she's letting me in on her plans. I think I liked it better when she manipulated me into doing what she wanted."
Which, I get it.
Yeah.
If you know what's happening, you're complicit.
And so that was kind of like she trusted him but didn't rely on him in the same way.
Yeah. Because none of her advisors are reliable in that way. Like, they are Odysseus's advisors, and some of them might do what she says without arguing, but not all of them. Some of her advisors definitely have more of their self-interest at heart.
Well, a couple of them are just genuinely antagonistic against her. Medon, at
Yeah.
least, is, like I said, on her side.
Yeah. I don't know if I would call any of her advisors actually antagonistic, but they would be antagonistic if given the
Mm.
chance.
Medon respects her and realizes that she's doing something behind the scenes. He doesn't, like,
Yes.
know the extent of it, but he knows that she is the one actually making sure this island functions.
Yeah, some of her advisors just see her as a woman who
Which,
has to be there.
which in this setting, not worth much.
Nope. I also really enjoyed hating Menelaus.
I loved Menelaus. And I mean, like, he was a villain and I hated him, but I loved him so much.
Yes. But like he wasn't I mean, he was terrible and I hated him, but loved hating him, like I said. But
Mhm.
also he wasn't one-dimensional. Like he he is definitely acting in his own self-interest. He's not a good guy, but he's also kind of aware of that.
Mhm.
And also does make things better for Penelope when it aligns with what he wants.
When he first rolls in, he starts immediately fucking with the suitors in a way
Yes.
that was just really enjoyable to read because the suitors suck so hard. That's the whole point. In the whole point of the Odyssey is that Penelope has suitors who suck really hard.
Basically.
And so now we have a 3-book series about how hard these suitors suck and also all the other things happening around that. And so having someone who has overt power able to just openly mess with them was delightful.
Yes, 100% agreed.
Now, he was also extremely abusive to his family, so, not a great guy, and not someone that
No,
I liked as a character overall. I mean, I liked him as a character.
you didn't like him as a person, but you
Yeah.
liked him as a character.
Yes, exactly. And reading about him on the page didn't make me go, ugh.
Yes.
There are some villains
Yes.
that just suck so hard. I'm done with it, and I don't
Yeah.
enjoy reading about them.
Yeah.
But he had so much more dimension than that. Is it a spoiler to say that he respected Penelope as his own villain?
I don't think it's a spoiler to say that he comes to respect Penelope as his own antagonist.
The fact that she even is able to rise to the level of antagonist in his eyes is saying a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
He's one of the few men in this book who,
Acknowledges what she's doing.
yeah, understands her capabilities. And he still underestimates her, but not as
Yeah,
badly as most of the other characters.
I mean, he still dismisses her because she's a woman and she can't be as effective as him, a great hero. But the fact that he thinks that she can go against him at all is pretty impressive.
He's excited to go toe to toe with her politically, which
Yes.
is really fun.
Yes. I mean, he's a creep about that too. But
Yeah.
but
He's
yes.
gross.
Yes.
Now, the suitors, I do love how useless they are because it makes them bumbling fools that were, again, really enjoyable to dislike. But I kind of hated how that reinforced the theme that comes up in this book a few times. Characters from outside of Ithaca keep describing the people of Ithaca as men who were raised by women because all of the men in this kingdom went off to war 10 years ago, and so all of the men now were raised without the influence of adult male figures around them. And outsiders use that to dismiss them because how could a woman raise a man? Which is obviously garbage. Except then the suitors are really useless and kind of bumbling, and then it's like, well,
At the
well,
same time, though, I see what you're saying, and I don't entirely disagree. But at the same time, we see so many competent women. Like, basically, all of the women are competent, and we see women like taking up arms and defending the island. And so I think that reinforces the idea that this book proposes, or the the theme of this book being that even though people are saying this about the men, it's not on the women. Like, it says more about the men that they're like this than it does about how they were raised.
I like that. Because it's not that the women couldn't raise them, it's that the men or boys at the time believed that the women weren't worth listening to.
Yeah. So I do think that, yes, their behavior doesn't contradict anything that characters outside of the Isles are saying, but that's not what the book itself is saying.
I agree, which is why those moments made me cringe inside a little bit because I was like, well, I hate that that kind of reinforces it, but I like your interpretation better, and I think that fits in with the overall ethos of the series much better.
Yeah. Yeah, because this book is all about the various ways that women hold power and how they deal with the constraints of the society around them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's just one more aspect of it.
I would say there are two main aspects of that we see, which are, we get the huntresses who are, oh, I'm just a shepherd. That's why I'm wandering around in the wilderness. Also, I have an axe and a bow and arrow, and I could fuck you up, and you'll never expect it. Very badass, very cool. And then we also have the more maybe political female characters who are operating within a system run by men that prefers men, but still managing to exert their power in subtle ways. Penelope, obviously, our main character, doing that in Ithaca for the last, well, 2 books now. This book also introduces Helen, who, I mean, is a huge deal, right? Helen of Troy, Helen of Sparta.
Abs- Absolutely exerts her power, but all of that is kind of spoilers.
Well, I was going to talk about Aphrodite fucking her over.
Oh, yes, we can talk about Aphrodite fucking her over, but I do want to talk about how Helen exerts her powers in the spoiler section.
Yes. And Aphrodite is the narrator of this book, and Helen's her girl. She loves Helen. She talks about that so much. But also, Aphrodite absolutely fucked her over. I mean, because Helen was taken to Troy, there was a big old war. Everyone blames her for it, even though Aphrodite's the one that gave Helen to Paris in the first place. And now her husband is super abusive. She, like, I don't want to say as a shadow of her former self, but she's clearly not a super happy person.
She's not in a happy marriage. I don't think that can solely be attributed to her running away with Paris, because I think Menelaus would have turned abusive over something anyway.
Sure, yeah.
But I agree that Aphrodite absolutely fucks Helen over. But Aphrodite acknowledges that, and she
Yeah.
talks about how it wasn't her brightest decision and she was kind of operating in the heat of the moment. And that doesn't make it okay, but it means that I can accept her statements about loving Helen.
It's very flippant, but I guess I also do believe that a god would be flippant over the fate of a mortal. So maybe that's fine.
Yeah, I mean it's flippant but not overly so. Like, it's not more flippant than any of the other statements about the mortals coming
Yeah,
from any of the gods.
right. Except it's coming from the goddess who is like, Helen is the best. I love her so much. I'll do anything for her. Also, let's fuck up her life a little. But the book itself is still very sympathetic to Helen and the awful situation she is in, and also just how she is a woman of a certain age who was prized for her beauty in her youth, and how that specter hangs over her head now. She is very complex in a way that is absolutely spoilery to talk about, so maybe we should get there.
I before we move on to the spoiler section to talk about Helen, I would absolutely love a trilogy about the Iliad written by Claire North
Mm,
that focuses on Helen. Like,
yeah.
we have the Odyssey with Songs of Penelope, feel like there's room for a Helen trilogy.
I mean, I'd read it.
I would absolutely read it, but also like it would not, like sometimes you want more from a story and you just want more, but you don't actually think there's more story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this could, there could be story there. Well, there is story there, that the Iliad is its own thing. And I think that North would be able to make it fresh the way that she has made this fresh.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I got a really nice level of Helen on the page, and I like how mysterious she is in this. But that's because it's Penelope's story. So maybe I'm pushing back because I really love Penelope because she's our main character. And if it was Helen's story, I would feel differently.
Yeah, and the Iliad would have to be Helen's story. Like you couldn't, that would not be Penelope's story.
No. I'm trying to think if it could be someone else's.
You could maybe bring other people into it.
Cassandra?
The way that she brought Clytemnestra and Electra into this one. So you could absolutely bring other people into it.
But you think Helen would have to be the main character?
I think Helen would have to be the main character.
Yeah. It is kind of all about her in theory.
It is kind of all about her. I mean, obviously, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, as they were written, focus on the men. But if you look at the women in the story, yeah, for the Iliad, it's Helen, and for the Odyssey, it's Penelope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, fuck. I'd read it.
I would. I want it. I didn't know I wanted it until now, but now that I've talked about it, I'm like, man, Claire North, please.
Well, we're kind of hopeless fangirls for this series for a lot of reasons, mostly because it's very, very good, also a little bit for just personal circumstance.
We both grew up reading Greek mythology.
Yeah.
I think that does help with our enjoyment of this series.
But also, if you like, I don't want to say it, historical fantasy. I think, yeah, historical fantasy. This is absolutely, it's kind of our world, but kind of not, because the gods are running around sort of influencing things. They're not, like, showing up and dazzling people, but they have...
Not this story, anyway.
Yeah. They have influence over what's happening, and then we get sort of when the gods are battling behind the scenes, which is also really fun. But it is still a historical setting, and the politics is really well done. Then the way I have just described it kind of is how someone might describe Game of Thrones.
Except it's a much more modern prose than Game of Thrones. And it focuses more on the women than Game of Thrones.
And is good.
And is good.
Than Game of Thrones.
And is finished.
If you're a reader who thinks, dang, I probably should have liked Game of Thrones, try these books out. I'm going to throw that out there.
I'm not entirely sure I agree, but I'm not going to disagree either. Because I didn't particularly like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I didn't either. I loved these books. And
but I think there are other books that are a closer comparison to Game of Thrones. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, probably. But I would probably dislike them for the same reasons I dislike Game of Thrones. The strengths, like the bullet-pointed strengths that I see in this book are what I hear other people praising Game of Thrones for erroneously. There is the stories are so different though. I mean, because it's about subtle politicking under the constraints of a society that doesn't respect you. So much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a historical fantasy, mythology fantasy book that focuses on the women with a really, really engaging narrative voice, then I think this is a good series for you.
This book even threw in a little bit of a murder mystery.
It did.
So Penelope had her Poirot moment at the end where she walked through everything that happened, and I was living for it. Especially because we just read Murder on the Orient Express.
Yes. But, again, you should read Ithaca before you read House of Odysseus.
Yes. And don't come into it expecting a murder mystery. I'm saying there was an element.
There's a murder mystery in this book, but it's not the focus of the book, necessarily.
No. This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Fiction Fans.
That's us. We really appreciate our patrons because otherwise we fund this podcast entirely ourselves.
Patrons can find weekly bonus content, monthly exclusive episodes, and they have free access to our biannual zine, Solsticia.
You can find all of that and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for all of your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers. So, Helen. Very early on in this book, Helen is introduced. She is an absolute airhead. She's drunk all the time, is described as always talking about absolutely nothing. She's vapid. And my very first comment is, okay, but this is going somewhere, right?
And it does go somewhere.
Of course it does. North isn't going to do that to us or Helen. But it took a long time through the book for that to truly be revealed, and you had to trust North for that intervening time. I mean, it paid off. It was fine, but
it does pay off. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this book was that it shows us some of the different ways that the women in these positions of power deal with their circumstances. Obviously we have seen Penelope, scheming to essentially hold her throne to keep the suitors from over and to keep her in charge of Ithaca. But we see Helen exert a very different kind of power in a very different way. And my heart kind of breaks for Helen because I think Penelope ultimately is a little happier. I mean, she's not being physically abused, and Helen definitely is. But I liked that North shows that there are different ways for women to be powerful.
Absolutely. And the two of them talk a little bit about how Penelope uses they call it a disguise as a widow, but it's you are, though. It's not a disguise. You're just using it to your advantage. Whereas Helen uses the disguise of being a vapid airhead to sort of work around and keep people's expectations of them low so that they are able to get things done without anyone realizing it. And especially because this book is narrated by Aphrodite, it focuses so much on that sort of underhanded power of being underestimated. I feel like there's a lot of rhetoric around being beautiful and having people only care about your appearance, to the point where Helen's actual appearance doesn't matter anymore. She has become a figurehead. And I don't know. Like you said, my heart also broke for Helen.
I mean, she's a tragic figure, not just because of what happens with Paris, but she's in a really unhappy marriage. I mean, she's not well treated. She's not respected. She's not even really tolerated the way that Penelope is. She's being spied on by her ladies in waiting. She has no one she can trust.
Mm-hmm.
And she's decided that, or she has learned that her greatest safety lies in being seen as someone of no mind, no consequence, someone who only cares about appearance, when actually she's pretty thoughtful and schemy and, can hold her own.
Penelope has a network. She has not peers, right? I mean, technically, Eos and At are her slaves, although a different connotation in ancient Greece. But there are people who see her, and she is able to be herself around them. She still has to be their queen, but she doesn't have to put on this front of being a useless, sad, soppy widow.
She has much more of a support system than Helen does.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yes.
Support system.
She doesn't necessarily have, friends per se, but she does have a support system, and that's way more than Helen does.
Absolutely.
Since this is narrated by Aphrodite, and even though she doesn't focus on romantic relationships exclusively, it is still a interest of hers. I feel like there is a kind of a will they won't they thing between Penelope and Kenamon, who's a suitor from Egypt. And to me, it felt a little shoved in and out of place. But I'm not sure if that's just because I don't like romance plot lines as much. So it could be a me thing. But I also kind of wonder if it's because I know it's not going to go anywhere, and the characters know that it's not going to go anywhere, and they don't have enough longing for me to care that they know that it's not going to go anywhere.
It wasn't longing. It feels more like a crush, honestly.
Yes,
Like, this is the first time that they encountered someone that they were like, oh, or at least for Penelope, I like this person. I could see myself actually being with him.
It does feel like a crush, but just, I don't know. Because they can never act on it, I'm like, what's the point in having this here?
So I think that fits perfectly in with Aphrodite as the narrator.
It does.
Because
it does. Like,
she
it
is
makes
constantly
sense.
saying, kiss, 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 which is often my refrain when I'm reading a book.
It does make sense, but it just, I don't know.
It was shoehorned in, and we absolutely saw Aphrodite shoehorning it. Now, I really like Kenamon just as a character straight up.
Oh yeah, I think he's great, to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, my issues with their mutual crush has nothing to do with the characters themselves.
I had an issue with this where whenever Aphrodite introduces a character, she does give us like a little bit of backstory on them, but from the perspective of romantic relationships, which I thought was very fun and enjoyed quite a bit. You know, oh, there's the captain of the guard who did have a true love once until she accidentally made fun of him and he killed her. And oh, there's this person who lost their childhood love. And, you know, everyone has that like as their sort of.
I mean, that was great.
Yes.
Like, it was great.
When she introduces Electra, she says, this is not a word for word quote because I don't think I actually highlighted it at the time. Something about how Electra thought she closed her heart to love, but oh boy, did she have no idea. Like some kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge about the future. Now, this could be me not knowing that story very well, but I was like, okay, all right. And then when Aphrodite, reintroduces, because we meet Kenamon in the first book, but in this book, when Kenamon is introduced, similarly, it's something along the lines of, oh, and he does kind of have a crush on Penelope. He thinks that's not going to go anywhere. Little does he know what's in store for him. And my mind went, oh, Electra and Kenamon are going to fuck. This Penelope thing is going to be a red herring, because obviously that could never happen. But Electra can totally get laid. That would be fine. It's not like Orestes is going to get mad at her for that. And so at every moment, like, they didn't interact at all for the first half of the book, but I was waiting. I was there. I was ready. And then when Penelope takes her small little gathering to get the fuck out of Ithaca, and she's just taking Orestes and Electra because they are, you know, very much being hunted by Menelaus. And then we find out that she brought 2 suitors because they had a big boat and she needed a big boat. And then Kenamon shows up. And I was like, yeah, I knew it. He's there. Electra's there. There's only like 5 people. They have to interact. This is when it starts. No, none of that. None of that happened.
I will confess I did not get that from Electra and Kenamon at all.
No, this was entirely because they both got the same, like, little did they know in their intros. I thought that was echoing itself.
Right.
So I read way too far into it. And so whenever Kenamon and Penelope were like being flustered and crushy around each other, I was like, oh, it's okay, Kenamon. Like, this sucks now, but you'll have someone later. And so none of that bothered me because I was like, this is all just a setup for something else. It wasn't.
No, it was not. It was just Kenamon and Penelope having a crush on each other.
Yeah.
Which again is fine. Like, I don't mind that in concept, and I do like the idea of Penelope kind of exploring what she wants in a relationship and who she is as a woman rather than just as a queen. But because I knew that it's not going to go anywhere, I was like, what's the point? I think I needed it to be more to be invested in it.
That's very funny to me because what book was it? Space Brooms, I think, talked about a character who had
You
a crush
froze.
that was never ever going to happen. And you argued vehemently that that's okay because crushes don't have to be logical, and just because the other person isn't into you, you can't just turn it off. And so how
Sure.
come
Well,
just
okay.
because they're in a situation where they can never actually be together, you can't just turn your crush off according to you?
No, I'm not arguing for them having crush or for them not having crushes on each other. Like it's totally logical that they have crushes on each other. That's fine. I just didn't care.
Mm.
And the book wanted me to care about it.
Is it because they were too practical about it? They weren't like
Yes.
mopey?
Yes, it was they were too practical about it. I was like, okay, you recognize that it's not practical to have a crush on each other. So why are you talking about it all the time? You know it's
See,
silly.
I love that because I think there is something very beautiful and pure in an absolute nothing crush. That like if someone has a crush, they get the butterflies in their stomach, they're super into that person, it's never going to actually happen and they're okay with that. They're just enjoying the butterflies. They're enjoying the ride.
Yes, but if that was the case, I wanted that to be more of a focus in the story.
So actually you needed more.
Yes, I needed more.
Yeah.
Like it was not the fact I don't have an issue with them having a crush on each other. That's fine. It's the fact that it was so low level that I was like, why are you talking about it in the story? Like, if it's this low level and you acknowledge that it's not going anywhere, like just what does this inclusion bring as it is?
It got an uncanny valley worst middle ground of page time, is what you're saying.
Yes.
It
Yes.
needed either more or less.
Yes.
I can get behind that.
I would have been fine with it being more, like, because it is, this book is narrated by Aphrodite, and Penelope is allowed to have crushes on people who are nice to her, for once. But it
And
just,
hot.
yeah,
Because there are some people who are
yeah,
nice to her, but they're like father figures, and that's not fun.
yes, yes. So she's allowed to have crushes on people who are nice to her and hot. But it was at the wrong level. Yeah,
Yes.
it was at the wrong level for me.
So I know I talk a lot about how much I love interpersonal politics, but it actually got to the point where it annoyed me a little bit in this book. There's that dynamic of the Spartans who are definitely they have invaded Ithaca, basically. Penelope and her team basically go, we've been conquered. Like they moved all their warriors in, there's nothing we can do. But it's all under the guise of, oh no no no, allow me. Oh no no no, allow me. Except there's like no pushback at all, not even under the guise of being polite. Like I understand, of course, that they're not going to actually confront Menelaus because that is when it turns violent, and we as the reader understand he is absolutely capable of violence and totally fine with taking it to that place. He just doesn't see the need to, and he's right, he doesn't need to. But there's one moment kind of near the beginning when one of the Spartan maids is trying to do Electra's hair, and Electra's maid says like, back off, we got this. Like, hey, don't you worry about Electra's hair, I will worry about Electra's hair. And I wanted that to happen more. It
Okay,
felt like they were just pushovers the whole time.
so I do have a rebuttal for this. The first is that Electra is also a guest. She has leeway that Penelope doesn't. The second is that Penelope is a woman and she can't be like Electra doesn't necessarily care about being viewed as not a threat,
Mm-hmm.
and Penelope does. Penelope's whole livelihood basically depends on it. And three, she saves all of that pushback for when it's effective. Like she's not going to do anything that would make Menelaus be on his guard or like think that he has to have more strength. She waits until he is convinced that he's, taken over, and then she pushes back. So I think it made a lot of sense, actually.
I mean, it made sense, and it was very realistic. It just, as the reader, it got frustrating. I think, for me, at least.
I didn't find it frustrating personally, but
I mean, her pushback could have been like super kiss assy and a total misdirection. I just wanted at least one moment, I think. Not that her actions were unrealistic and clearly they were successful. I just wanted a little bit of that because I had to read Menelaus walking all over her for many pages. And I needed something to get me through a little bit. Although the ending was so satisfying that, like, it was fine.
I didn't need that, but I can see where you're coming from.
And yeah, it was just a lot to get to the end. But when we do get to the end, oh damn, does Penelope go off?
She really does get her moment, and it is chef's kiss.
There are two moments in particular that I think deserve recognition. The first one is when Penelope recruits the suitors into her scheme to get rid of Menelaus. She summons the advisors and the suitors. These are two separate scenes, but like they felt good in the same way, so I'm lumping them together right now. These men who have dismissed her and talked down to her and looked down on her for years. She summons them and says, "Here's the situation, here's what I'm going to do about it, and here's what you are going to do to get that done." And they bluster and are like, "What? I didn't even know you could talk," basically. And she says, "Well, you're going to do what I say anyway, for this, and that reason." And she's right, and they do. And that was just felt so good after 2 fucking books of them demeaning her. So that was fantastic. Her getting her like mastermind moment. And then at the end, after Menelaus has been frankly defeated, she's sitting at the table with Menelaus, Laertes, her father-in-law, and Orestes, who is now not back to full health, but at least in sound mind. And she runs that table. She's like, "This is what's going to happen. Menelaus, you're going to leave. You're going to tell people this because of this reason. And I don't even have to worry about you because of that, and this other thing." And then it gets even better because after Orestes and Laertes leave, Menelaus has become poisoned. We find out later there was other stuff going on there. And then she gets to like lord over him as he is writhing on the floor. And she's like, "And I will get to you. I have my ways." And it, after everything she and consequently the reader has been through in these 2 books, it felt so good to get that moment.
It's very satisfying. Very satisfying.
Ah, fuck. So yeah, it was okay. I guess knowing that I was waiting for that, I could have totally gotten through the book without any of the pushback. I just know while I was reading it, I was thinking, you could have at least tried, you know?
I think I was pretty sure that there was going to be something coming, so I wasn't worried about it.
I mean, as the reader, we know that, yeah, Menelaus doesn't take over Ithaca. But Penelope doesn't know that. So why isn't she trying to do something?
No, but even though, like, Penelope doesn't know that, I have had trust in the Penelope that had been, like, written to know that she was scheming stuff.
Okay, so you think she was just lying low until she could do the whole big scheme, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Like, she was waiting until her pushback was going to be most effective.
I still think, like, against the servants or something. Like, I don't know. Laertes does get to push back a little bit, which I appreciated.
Again, like, to your point about Electra pushing back, Electra's not the host.
Yeah.
Electra is a guest. She has power that Penelope doesn't in this particular situation.
But even then, in the narrative, they're talking about, well, I guess Aphrodite is the narrator. Aphrodite is talking about how Menelaus is not doing things like up to code. He is behaving in ways that you're not supposed to do to your host. And so Penelope had space to say, well, as your host, this is how it's supposed to be. These are the standards that we as this society have agreed on. And she didn't even try.
But Menelaus is a man, and he can direct the narrative in ways that Penelope can't.
I mean, yeah. But I'm just saying.
I think it would have gone poorly for Penelope if she had tried to push back at that time. Even still, because we have seen throughout the story how even though there are societal rules and regulations, if it's a man flaunting them, it kind of is okay. And if it's a woman doing it, whoa.
I mean, even a kiss-assy, like, oh, please don't bother yourself with that. And then immediately back down if he, like, continues.
But she does that. She does that. She does that about the wine. She does that about, like, the meat. She does that for a lot of things.
Okay.
She's like, you don't have to go, hunting here. I'll show you where the good hunting spots are. Or, like, you don't have to bring your own wine. It reflects poorly on me as a host.
Okay.
Like, she does push back in those little kiss-assy ways.
All right. Fair enough.
And then, yeah, she backs down immediately, but...
Well, yeah, of course, because you have to. Like, you're not actually going to go to toe-to-toe with Menelaus, of course.
Yeah.
That I have no problem with.
She does have, like, when it makes sense, she does have those statements.
Fair enough. And again, the payoff absolutely gets there for me, so it's fine. But that was my experience. Yeah. Reading the book, I was just like, oh, please. Anyway, we both are, like, immediately ready to read the next book. And I know, for me, I'm very curious if it's the same situation for you. For me, it is because I am so concerned about Odysseus.
I am 100% worried. So the book basically ends with Odysseus washing up on the shores of Ithaca. And I am really worried that he's going to be an asshole.
Yeah, we have no idea what he's like. Penelope has no idea what he's like. Is he going to be like Laertes and recognize that Penelope is great and is an asset? Is he going to be like every other king we've seen? That's not fair. Orestes is chill. He's a kid.
Yeah, but Orestes is also mad.
Not at the end.
Not at the end, but I still don't know how much he recognizes Penelope as being great. Because he's recovering.
He respects his sister's autonomy, though.
He does respect his sister's autonomy, that's true.
And so, like, yeah, maybe not Penelope, but who is she to him? He doesn't know Penelope. That's fine.
I mean, they are related, but yeah.
Yeah. Everyone is related. This is Greek mythology.
But yeah, I'm so worried. I need to read book 3.
I think in the perfect world, Odysseus will roll up and he will start off like an ass, and that over the course of the book, he will come to learn and realize how great Penelope is. Maybe he'll have a heart-to-heart moment with Laertes, could be good. And then it will end with them in a mutually respectful marriage.
I hope so.
That's my, like... Because he can't just show up and be great. There's not a lot of conflict in story there.
I mean, there's conflict in other ways because of the whole, like, having to deal with the suitors stuff. But I agree there's not a lot of interpersonal conflict in that.
I don't feel like that's the story North is going for, I guess is what I should say.
Probably not. You're probably right about that.
Although, I guess he could, in the way that Menelaus respected Penelope as, not his equal, but as a foe worth fighting, Odysseus might respect Penelope, but not trust her.
Yeah, I mean, also, in the Odyssey, like, he doesn't talk to her until he reveals himself at the very end.
Right.
So, we could, in theory, go, 80% of the story without him actually interacting with Penelope in a way that she recognizes as him being Odysseus.
Right, so Penelope won't know that it's him, but he'll know that it's her.
he will know that it's her.
And that kind of lends credence to the idea that, like, he's not revealing himself because he doesn't trust her.
Yeah, could be.
Like, I could see that. Like, he could acknowledge how great and amazing she is, but not think that she would help him.
I would not be mad about that.
Like, that, like, because there's two different sides of it, right? There's them liking each other.
How far in book 3 have you gotten?
I only actually read the, like, little intro that's at the end of this book.
Oh, okay.
So he's still just on the beach.
Okay.
This is not spoilers, I promise.
No. I wasn't worried about it being spoilers. I was just like interested in if you had gotten any farther, if that had like had an effect on your perspective. But,
no, we've mostly just gotten Athena waxing poetical about him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay, here's why I think it will end with him. At least the very least end with him respecting Penelope. Him liking her, that could go either way. I don't like I care obviously, but that's not what I'm concerned about.
Even though the women in this book have not, or in this series have not had great ends, really, I feel like Claire North would not do that to us for the main woman. She couldn't.
Well, and also the other women that have had bad ends, that has been written in history that they had bad ends.
True.
Penelope has a happily ever after. According to the Odyssey, her husband comes home. She doesn't have to be queen anymore. Yay!
True. Well, she still has to be queen, but she doesn't have to be ruler.
Yeah. And that was a sarcastic yay, just for clarity.
Yes.
Athena likes Penelope. We know this. She has helped Penelope. And not only because she is helping Ithaca for Odysseus, like, from her interactions with the other goddesses, I think it's clear that Athena likes Penelope.
I would agree.
And I don't think Athena's going to let her special boy get away with ending the book. Not that Odysseus knows it's the end of the book, but you know what I mean. Ending the book, holding his wife in contempt. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen either, but also I'm worried.
I'm still...
And also I'm wondering, what can we change on our schedule so that we read this before,
I know, can we before
read this August? Yeah.
Well, that is a calendar conversation we can have off air. I think we can wrap up by saying, holy shit, I have a lot of emotions and I'm not done with this world.
We have a lot of emotions and we are not done with this world.
Yes.
Really excellent book. I've loved both books in this trilogy that we've read, and I'm really looking forward to reading book 3.
I do. I didn't say this before, but I do have a words are weird, actually.
Oh.
At the end, when there's the little council between Laertes, Orestes, Menelaus, and Penelope, and Orestes says, as part of the, agreement that we're going to have, you are going to send me your daughter, Hermione, to marry me, because that's an old marriage pact. I'm going to hold you to it. And Menelaus says something along the lines of, oh wow, so this is all wrapping up so familial and snuggly. He did not say snuggly. That was me reading too fast at the time. He said snugly, which is a completely different word, except also an identical. I mean, not actually, like, there's only one G, right? It's snugly, yes. Not snuggle-y.
Yes.
But I just had that moment of, oh, I completely misread this sentence.
But the whole dialogue, I mean, all of the dialogue in this book is very anachronistic. Menelaus is going, where the fuck is Orestes?
Oh, so, yeah. As far as anachronisms go, that was not the problem. It's just the vibes of Menelaus saying snuggle. That was kind of weird for me.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Snug just has very different.
It has a very different feeling
than snuggle.
Yes. Menelaus is not really a man who seems that he would say snuggle very often.
No.
If at all.
No. And so that was just a funny moment of, the number of G's there really, really changed that sentence. I mean, not in meaning, but just in tone.
Yes, in vibe.
Yes. No snuggling. This book is devoid of snuggling.
No. No snuggling.
Not even mentioned.
Nope.
That was it. That was my words are weird.
The good words are weird, to be fair.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on our YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.